morning sun painted the Arizona desert in shades of gold and amber, as Frank Morrison made his way across the pasture behind his modest ranch house. At 62 years old, he had learned to appreciate these quiet moments before the day's work began, when the air still held the cool breath of night and the world seemed to pause in peaceful contemplation. Frank had been walking this same path for nearly 30 years, since he and his late wife Martha had bought the small ranch with dreams of raising horses and living simply under the vast western sky. Martha had been gone for 3 years now, but Frank still found comfort in their morning routine of checking the fences and greeting the horses who had become his closest companions in these later years of life. Today, however, something was different. As he approached the old oak tree that marked the boundary between his property and the open rangeland beyond, he noticed disturbed earth near its massive trunk. The soil had been recently turned, as if someone had been digging in the pre-dawn darkness. Frank's weathered hands instinctively reached for the shovel he always carried during his morning rounds, and he began to carefully examine the area. The digging wasn't random or careless. Someone had worked methodically, creating a shallow depression about 2 feet across. As Frank gently scraped away the loose dirt with his shovel, he felt the metal strike something solid. His heart quickened as he cleared away more soil, revealing what appeared to be the corner of a small wooden box buried just beneath the surface. "Well, I'll be," Frank murmured to himself as he worked to uncover the mysterious object. The box was old but well preserved, wrapped in what looked like oiled cloth that had protected it from the elements. As he lifted it from its earthen hiding place, Frank noticed how light it was, almost as if it contained nothing at all. Behind him, he heard the soft sound of footsteps on dry grass. Frank turned slowly, his years of ranch life having taught him to move deliberately, and without alarm even when surprised. What he saw made him pause and take a gentle breath. A young woman was walking toward him across the pasture, her dark hair tangled, and her clothes dusty from what appeared to be a long night outdoors. She looked to be in her early 30s, with the kind of tired eyes that spoke of troubles that went deeper than physical exhaustion. Her hands were dirty with fresh soil, and Frank realized immediately that she must be the one who had done the digging. The woman stopped about 10 feet away from Frank, her gaze fixed on the wooden box in his hands. Her shoulders sagged with what looked like defeat, and Frank could see tears beginning to form in her eyes. She reminded him somehow of his own daughter Sarah, who lived back east and whom he hadn't seen in over a year. There was something about the way this stranger held herself that spoke of pride wrestling with desperation. "I stole nothing," she whispered so quietly that Frank had to strain to hear her words carried on the morning breeze. "I promise you, sir, I stole nothing from your land." Frank set the box down carefully on a flat rock and took a step back, giving the woman space while keeping his expression gentle and non-threatening. In his years of ranching, he had encountered all manner of people who found themselves on his property for various reasons. Some were lost travelers, others were running from troubles they couldn't face, and a few were simply looking for work or help. Frank had learned long ago that kindness was usually the best first response regardless of the circumstances. "Ma'am," Frank said in the same quiet tone he used to calm spooked horses, "I can see you're upset, and I want you to know that I'm not angry about the digging. Sometimes people need to bury things, and sometimes they need to dig them up again. Would you mind telling me your name?" The woman looked at Frank with surprise, as if she had expected anger or accusations rather than gentle understanding. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving streaks in the dust on her cheeks. "Elizabeth," she said after a moment of hesitation. "Elizabeth Harper. I used to live around these parts about 15 years ago, when I was just a teenager. My family had a small place about 5 miles north of here before we lost it to the bank." Frank nodded slowly, recognizing something in her story that resonated with his own understanding of how life could change directions without warning. He had seen many families come and go over the years, each carrying their own burdens of hope and disappointment. "Elizabeth," Frank repeated, letting her name settle comfortably in the morning air. "That's a fine name. My wife Martha always said it was the name of queens and strong women. Would you like to sit down and maybe tell me about this box you've buried? There's a nice spot under the tree here, and I've got a thermos of coffee in my truck if you're interested." Elizabeth looked at Frank with the wariness of someone who had learned not to trust too quickly, but something in his weathered face and patient manner seemed to reassure her. She nodded and walked slowly toward the shade of the oak tree, settling herself on a smooth section of root that formed a natural seat. Frank retrieved his thermos and 2 metal cups from his pickup truck parked nearby. As he poured the coffee, Elizabeth began to speak in a voice that carried the weight of years and difficult choices. When I was 17, my mother got sick. She began accepting the cup of coffee with hands that trembled slightly. Cancer. The medical bills ate up everything we had and then some. My father tried to keep the ranch going, but without my mother's help, and with all the debt, it was impossible. Before we lost the place, my mother gave me this box. She said it contained letters and photographs that told the story of our family going back 3 generations. Elizabeth paused to take a sip of coffee, and Frank waited patiently, letting her find her own pace for the telling. He had learned that rushing someone's story was like trying to hurry a sunrise. It happened in its own time or not at all. My mother made me promise to keep the box safe no matter what happened to us. Elizabeth continued. She said that as long as we had our family history, we would never truly be lost. So the night before the bank came to take the property, I buried it here under this old tree. I figured it would be safe here, and someday when things got better, I could come back for it. Frank felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he got when he watched young colts struggle to find their footing, or when he remembered his own difficult times after Martha's death. Life had a way of testing people's strength in the most fundamental ways. 15 years is a long time to be separated from something so important, Frank said gently. What brought you back now? Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they seemed to carry relief as much as sorrow. My father passed away last month, she said. I've been living in California trying to make a life for myself, working in hotels and restaurants. Never married, never had children, always seemed to be moving from one place to another. When Dad died, I realized I was the last one left who remembered our family's stories. I drove all the way from Los Angeles to dig up this box because I felt like I was disappearing without it. Frank reached over and gently picked up the wooden box, examining it more closely in the morning light. The craftsmanship was beautiful, with hand-carved details that spoke of someone taking great care and time in its creation. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman, Frank said, and your father must have been proud to see you grow up to be someone who honors promises made long ago. Not everyone has that kind of character. Elizabeth looked at Frank with gratitude shining in her eyes. I was so scared you would think I was stealing or trespassing. I've been driving around since yesterday trying to work up the courage to come onto your land. I saw you walking out here this morning, and I thought for sure I was going to end up in trouble with the law. Frank chuckled softly, the sound carrying warmth like sunshine breaking through clouds. Elizabeth, I've been ranching long enough to know the difference between someone who means harm and someone who's just trying to find their way home. You want to see what 15 years of Arizona earth has done to your family treasures? Elizabeth nodded eagerly, and Frank carefully worked the latch on the old box. The oiled cloth had done its job well, and the contents appeared to be in remarkable condition. Inside were dozens of photographs, letters tied with faded ribbons, and what appeared to be a family Bible, with names and dates written in careful script on the inside pages. Oh my goodness. Elizabeth breathed as she gently lifted out a photograph of a young couple, standing in front of a small house with mountains in the background. This is my great-grandparents on their wedding day in 1943. I haven't seen this picture since I was a child. Frank watched as Elizabeth carefully examined each item in the box, her face lighting up with recognition and joy as she rediscovered pieces of her family's story. There was something deeply moving about watching someone reconnect with their roots, and Frank found himself thinking about his own family, photographs that sat in albums on his bookshelf back in the house. You know, Elizabeth, Frank said after they had spent nearly an hour going through the contents of the box. I have a proposition for you. I'm getting older, and this ranch is more than I can handle by myself. I've been thinking about hiring someone to help with the horses and the maintenance work. The pay isn't much, but there's a small apartment above the barn that comes with the job. If you're looking for a place to settle down and reconnect with this part of the country, why,